It's time for the return of the motherland, the tier 8 Soviet medium tank that has recently been buffed so that the penetration values of this tank are a little bit better. The dispersion, I believe, got better, and there's a few things that have changed about this vehicle along with the T44-100 and some of the other variants of the kind of T44 essentially. And this is the skinned version that was actually available as part of one of the first earn operations a long time ago on World of Tanks, probably maybe 5-6 years ago I'm talking about. So on, I believe, Xbox 360 this might have even been, so yeah, quite a while ago. And now we're on Xbox Series X. I mean, we've gone 2 versions of console and this is still around, and of course still a very good premium tank, even if it is kind of aged and maybe not as good as it once was, because this used to have a little bit of armor but back in the day, but unfortunately now the armor model, I mean, it holds up, it has a decent amount of armor, but it's by no means anywhere near competitive when it comes to tier 8 bouncing and coming away with a ton of block damage, but it can still be used really effectively, and the main armament of this thing is ridiculously good, which is what makes me really happy to be reviewing this tank once again. And hopefully you guys will be interested to see what this tank is all about, because it is quite a kind of a novel and I guess unique tank that we haven't really seen in a long time. I'm not talking about the actual look of the tank, I'm talking about the actual tank itself. It's not really seen that many times within the game, and it's because it is a kind of an older premium tank that I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about at this point in World of Tanks. But you can see me here, we've picked up 1000 damage, and that's because the 240 alpha, I believe, of this vehicle is pretty nice, and that allows you to essentially plow through all of the opponents that we'll be facing in today's video. And with the APCR rounds getting a buff as well, it allows you to pen some of these tier 10s for once, as opposed to having to just sit there bouncing off of them, which is essentially what the tank was like prior to the buff. So with all of these changes and stuff like that, the tank feels a ton better, and it definitely feels like a bit more of a competitive tank once again, and you can definitely use it very well. I mean, this tank is by no means bad, and I feel like a lot of people disregard these sorts of tanks. The T44-100, the T44 itself, the tech tree version, still a very good tank, of course this being a premium version. But essentially, with all of the recent buffs that they've done to some of the older premiums, this one got all of those buffs as well, along with pretty much all of these Soviet tanks with this sort of gun, and just making them a little bit more competitive, which is definitely something that they deserved. It's been a while, and with these sorts of buffs, it just makes them a little bit better. And that's what we want when we look back at some of these tanks. It's always good to shift up some of the meta tanks that we once had in the game, that are, you know, some of the more overpowered tanks, and of course keeping them all in line and keep shifting up is what makes this game a little bit more interesting, where you don't just have the same tanks being the overpowered ones, or the same tanks just constantly being you know, the top of the game, whereby Wargaming are basically buffing and nerfing certain tanks to make them a little bit more interesting. And of course the game balance is very difficult to have on a game like this, where, you know, there are so many tanks, and of course some of them are going to be better than others. Some of them are typically like a not necessarily the statistics wise terrible, but maybe some features of them are not ideal and stuff like that. But this tank's still a very good one. I'm focusing on trying to get this FE out of the way, but for some reason the T100 here deciding to come after us. We try and go for a snapshot, unfortunately it doesn't work. Kind of annoying there. We should have really finished this T100 LT off. So bit of a misplay by me. I could have quite easily finished him off if I wasn't kind of tunnel visioning on the FE there, but I really thought the FE was a bit more of a big problem, and I was hoping my teammates would finish off the light tank, but of course I was wrong in that assumption. We get a few nice shots into the back of the Kranvang. At this point it's just basically time to go in. There's not a lot of damage left in this game, with only 5 vehicles on the enemy team, and of course 13 on our team. So yeah, it's a bit of a club game, I guess, a bit of a seal clubbing game. I guess the enemy team just weren't quite ready for the RAF that our team were going to send their way. But given the fact that we're on 1,000 hit points and I just want as much damage as possible, it's time to go in. We decide to go in after the T95E2, the tier 8, which is essentially like a pattern tier 8. And unfortunately, we're getting farmed by someone who's in the base, or at least by the looks of it, an autoloader that's in the base. Now, unfortunately for the T95, he does bounce off of us, and the Emil 1951, who was the autoloader in the base, gets shut down, and we pick up a win, picking up 3,200 damage and 977 assistance, and of course coming away with victory, 1,750 base experience, and more importantly 1.4 million silver in that game because of the silver with interest operation. So a fantastic one there. But let's jump into the next game, and that better game comes in the form of Heilbronn, and we are once again in a tier 10 matchup because of course being a tier 8 this is probably what you'll see, and you can see me here. We start the game off a little bit into it. We just basically had a recording issue I believe at the beginning of the replay, which is a little bit unfortunate, but either way we're not going to complain too much, and we can get straight into it. You can see what this tank is all about, and hopefully give you a little bit of an extra one on a map that is predominantly more hilly. You've got a lot of more areas in which you have to use gun depression, which this tank doesn't really get a whole lot of. I think it's 5 degrees of gun depression, maybe even 6 at the max, I believe. Something in that region. I believe it might be 5 degrees, but either way it's not perfect, and it certainly isn't the British gun depression of 10 or 12 degrees or something ridiculous. But that's why you get the armour, that's why you get the ability to have some turret armor as opposed to having that gun depression and the gun statistics that having the lack of armor gives you, which is of course the trade-off. Obviously you can't have everything unless of course you're the AVRE, but either way, at the beginning of this game we're just trying to get some easy shots of damage. Like I say in all of the games, when you're in a bottom tier game you should never just go YOLOing in and then wonder why your team aren't helping you, or wonder why you've been taken out within a few seconds because you've met a tier 10 with double the alpha damage of you and basically better DPM than you and probably reloads faster than you. Of course it might be the fact that they're 2 tiers higher than you and you YOLO'd in, but of course when you're in these bottom tier matchups, just be a little bit more careful. I'm not talking about camping in the spawn. There's a time and a place where that might be useful when you're in the late game and you're just waiting for an opponent to make a misplay. But at this point in the game, you know, you need to be furthest forward to at least give yourself the opportunity to get damage, because early damage and getting damage for free is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people don't end up, you know, progressing their game or having a higher win rate or helping their team win, or you know, feeling like they've had an impact like they really should in the game, is often because they've not like taken that aggressive play. They're so cautious that they don't get involved, and of course if you're not actually getting involved in the game you don't get that experience of you know, finding positions that are good in the game for early damage and stuff like that, which is obviously imperative when you're trying to learn the game. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm far from perfect in the game. I've just had a lot of experience and a lot of fails within World of Tanks where it comes to, you know, making bad mistakes, and I still do it now, and that's after what, like 24,000 games and with a 61% win rate or something ridiculous. But yeah, there are still times where I make a mistake, and I'm sure a ton of you do as well. But one of the things is that you should always try and learn from your mistakes, and I do it now. There's so much I need to learn still. There's so many positions that are very good that you'll learn throughout the game, but if you're sat in your base or you're sitting at the back or you're too scared to push up where you might do bad, it's like, come on, you're going to learn the game, you're going to learn some positions. I'm not talking about YOLOing in, by the way. I'm not talking about, you know, just going straight into a random position and hoping it goes alright. I'm talking about just taking a spot where you think it's going to be good, seeing if it works out. If it doesn't work out in the game, or it starts to become unusable, or there's loads of tanks hitting you, then of course don't stay there and hope that it's going to work. Just, you know, pull back and realise maybe this isn't the best position. And if you're critical of your own games, it's going to be one of the best things for you to improve as a player, if you're interested in that, of course. If you're not, then it doesn't matter, you know, just play the game how you want to play it. And at the end of the day, having, you know, gone through all of that, you know, focusing on trying to get amazing stats and trying to learn how to play the game, have I enjoyed it any more than when I just first started playing and I was just trying to enjoy myself? No. I mean, does it make it more interesting where, you know, you can pull off the victories and where you can show people up? Yeah, I mean, it is more interesting in that regard, but Do you have more fun? No, not really. And that's really something that I feel like it doesn't get told enough on World of Tanks, is that, you know, this is a game, it's a casual game, no one is doing a competitive scene really on this game. I mean, come on, you're playing against 50-year-old people. You know, the average audience age for my channel is like 35 to 40 or something like that, so you guys know, you know, you're probably a casual player, you're not someone that is trying to focus on getting stats, and you really shouldn't for the most part, because it's just not fun when you're starting to get into the you know, getting annoyed when you have a bad game and that sort of thing. For the most part, I try and emphasize that, you know, you should just play the game how you want to play it and try and enjoy yourself. If you're not enjoying it, stop playing, play a different game, find something else, and then of course you can come back to it when you're feeling a little bit less triggered or whatever it might be. You know, don't force yourself into playing a game that you're not enjoying. Now, in this game, of course, we've gone after the Z100. I'm hoping that my team would help me. And oh god, it's not looking good. But we do bounce the E100 here. We try and go for the lower plate, and oh no, it's not looking too good. But this T44 on the enemy team's been farming me. I didn't want to go for him because I wanted to help the team with the E100. But yeah, I mean, we lost a lot of hit points to that guy. Maybe it would have been worth getting him, but at the end of the day, I wanted the more damage, which was ultimately what it was all about. But 3,500 damage and 609 assistance in a tier 10 game is by no means bad, and hopefully that gives you an indication once again of the Motherland's power, and that it is still very competitive, along with the T44-100 and of course all of the variants of the kind of premium medium Soviet tanks, the Volk T44-100, etc. And hopefully that was a good one, and I'll see you in the next one coming soon. Goodbye.